Hey everybody, this is Shenandoah County Sheriff Tim Carter, and we've got some person visiting with us today. Special Agent, Virginia State Police Special Agent Josh Price. Josh, thanks for coming in today and talking with us a little bit here in Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, we did a podcast with Josh. I guess that's been a couple years ago, and we wanted to kind of get an update on the Northwest Virginia Regional Drug Task Force, what's Drug and Gang Task Force activities. So he was kind enough to come in today and talk with us a little bit about their annual report that they just put out. So I guess the first thing we ought to do, Josh, is talk a little bit about who makes up the task force again.
Okay. The task force is comprised of 9 area law enforcement agencies, the Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office, the Page County Sheriff's Office, the Clark County Sheriff's Office, Frederick County Sheriff's Office, Winchester Police Department, Front Royal Police Department, Strasburg Police Department, Luray Police Department, and the Virginia State Police.
Right. And basically the way task force work in the Commonwealth of Virginia is you have these agencies, they band together, and they're given state police credentials, and they work together on cases and things like that.
Right. So the task force has approximately 26 full-time task force officers that are, from these agencies. Each receives special state police authority to enforce laws across the Commonwealth.
Right.
Not bound by, a county border or town border. It's a pooling of resources. Each agency that assigns personnel, assigns them to 2 separate teams that we have on the task force, broken into a north team, Frederick County, Clark County, Winchester, and then a southern team in the counties of, Warren, Shenandoah, Page, and then those incorporated towns. And it's a pooling of resources, a pooling of, equipment, the knowledge of these investigators from each agency, knowledge of the area, knowledge of the community, equipment, and bring all that together.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as not to get too far into details, but as far as what do we do? I know there's a lot of intelligence gathering and sharing amongst agencies, and we also have relationships with federal organizations and task forces as well. And then there's also the actual work that goes into investigating and putting together criminal prosecutions with regard to narcotics enterprises.
Right. So the task force mission, our primary goal is to identify, disrupt, and dismantle major drug trafficking organizations that are operating here in the northern Shenandoah Valley. We target mid to upper level dealers and dangerous gang organizations that really bring crime and harm to the area. Another one of our goals is to do our best to try to reduce overdose deaths.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a key topic and has been for years. Is the increase in fentanyl and heroin that's in the area, the increase in the overdoses. We do have federal partners that work with us.
Mm-hmm.
We have agents from the DEA, the ATF, that do work in our offices with task force officers. So they're right there next door, right down the hall. That we can, when we get into some of our major investigations, that if we feel that it warrants, federal prosecution and federal assistance, they're right there, that we can just go right next door and talk to them about it. We are members of the Washington-Baltimore HIDA, the task force is. Frederick County and Warren County are both designated, so we do have that as far as a deconfliction with all agencies that are a part of the Washington-Baltimore HIDA.
Right. Now, HIDA stands for?
HIDA stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area.
Right.
And they're funded, ours is out of Washington, Baltimore. They're
Mm-hmm.
funded by the Office of National Drug Control Policy, ONDCP, from the White House.
Right. Now, as far as from looking at Shenandoah County specifically, I know the questions that I get mostly from citizens are regarding heroin and fentanyl. And again, for our listeners, we're going to have a 2022 year-end report that we're going to link to this podcast. But you'll see basically the street value of drugs for our whole region. But from a Shenandoah County perspective, I guess the big three would be big three would be methamphetamine, fentanyl, and heroin, I would think.
Correct. Yeah. So methamphetamine, I'd say, would probably be one of the primary for Shenandoah County, followed by fentanyl, heroin. They're very similar. Heroin we almost see very little of now, just because fentanyl is almost in everything. We're even seeing it just fentanyl. Fentanyl and heroin, as far as raw powder, fentanyl and heroin is coming out of Baltimore still. It's been coming out of there for years. It's very cheap. You can go to Baltimore and purchase a capsule of fentanyl for $5. Come back here and it's sold for $30 to $35. Pressed fentanyl pills, we see that coming out of primarily Northern Virginia. Really about the same thing. You're going to purchase those in the area for probably about $30 per pill.
Right. And I know Shenandoah County for years. Methamphetamine seems to be in our county, and I would think even Rockingham to some degree. Now, a lot of that was homemade, made locally. But it's my understanding that that's more being trafficked in to the region now than it is the actual homemade methamphetamine that we saw several years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago, we would have seen that shake and bake home cook method, as you mentioned. That was from people going to pharmacies getting Sudafed, which is the primary ingredient needed for making methamphetamine. They were cooking that in the home. The task force 10 years ago, we averaged probably 25 to 30 home meth labs that we would dismantle. Nowadays, we're only seeing probably about 1 to 2 a year. The methamphetamine that we're seeing is crystal meth. It's highly pure. It's being manufactured by drug cartels, trafficked into the area. That is one of the primary drugs that we're seeing in Shenandoah County. Right now, the trend that we're seeing is, many people are traveling to the Roanoke area where they're picking up crystal meth. There, it can be purchased for around $200 to $300 per ounce. Back here in our area, it's then sold for upwards of $800 to $900 per ounce. So it's very profitable.
Yeah, that's part of it. It's people are using it as a way to make money. I mean, on top of that, all of these things we're talking about are extremely addictive. And so you have the addiction issues surrounded by people that want to capitalize on the money that they can make off of people that have the addiction issues. So, yeah, that's something that we've seen for years now. Some of the other trends, maybe, Josh, that we're seeing in our region, I know, again, we talked about fentanyl and whatnot, but what are other things maybe that we're seeing in the region now?
So one emerging threat that's come out in the recent, probably the last month, is a drug called xylazine.
Right.
It's being mixed with fentanyl. However, it is not an opioid. Xylazine is it's manufactured to be like a tranquilizer for use in veterinary medicine. So it's a horse tranquilizer. I mean, the street name for it is like trank or trank dope is what it's being called. But the difference between this drug and, say, fentanyl is that, one, it's just as potent, if not worse, but it doesn't react to Narcan. As probably people have heard, Narcan, I mean, it's an opioid blocker. It's usually a nasal spray. It's carried by EMS and law enforcement. It's administered to someone who's suffering from an opioid overdose. However, it does not stop the effects of xylazine. Xylazine is one of those drugs that what we've seen is that in human consumption, and people use it, it causes blisters and sores on the skin. And we've seen, as far as I know, I think one case of this in our local hospitals, and it's something that now I do have the task force officers tracking whenever they're submitting fentanyl, heroin, and these drugs to the lab they're testing for these drugs. So we'll start tracking this now that this is an emerging trend.
Right. Yeah, it gets as a parent, it gets scary out here.
It does.
Really does.
Yeah.
But another trend we were talking earlier. I know we're also part of a multi-jurisdictional special grand jury. At least I think most of the jurisdictions in our task force are part of that, which I think is a benefit from an investigatory and prosecution standpoint. But you may want to talk just a little bit about that. I know we also have a relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office as well. So that would be, I would want people to know that we're looking at those trends as far as not just looking locally, but also regionally and federally with regard to our pursuit of these criminal enterprises.
Yeah, so special grand jury, and you're right, I think all but maybe one of our participating agencies is part of it. I see them all being a part of it in the near future. The special grand jury is just a tool that we have that if we have an investigation that we need indictments, we need to compel testimony from witnesses. This is a group that can be brought together to form exactly that, a special grand jury to hear the investigation, hear the case, hear the need for the indictments, compel witnesses to testify to assist us with that prosecution. For the relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office, we do have what's called a Special Assistant United States Attorney. That's funded through the Washington-Baltimore HIDA. That's part of that funding that we receive from them.
Right.
So the salary of that individual, that attorney, who's actually employed by the Winchester Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, is funded by the Washington-Baltimore HIDA. And so when we have those cases that we feel warrants federal prosecution or should go that route, he's the one that takes care of overseeing the investigation itself, the federal indictments, and the prosecution in the long run.
Right. Well, again, I know Shenandoah County was one of the organizations that were part of the original creation of our Regional Drug Task Force, Drug and Gang Task Force, and I really those were really the points I wanted to cover today. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything I missed or anything like that you might want to talk about?
No, nothing that I can think of. Thank you for having me.
Okay, sure. Well, I know from Shenandoah County's perspective, our relationship with the task force and with these other agencies has been something that I think has served the citizens well in Shenandoah County, and something that we work hard to continue because I think it's in the best interest of the people that we serve, helping us have a local impact on what we're trying to do from an enforcement standpoint and just a community service standpoint. I know one other aspect, and we'll get to this in another podcast, is that Shenandoah County is now trying to stand up a drug treatment court. So not only are we looking at the enforcement aspect of narcotics trafficking and the drugs that are in our region, but we're also looking at the treatment services and the addiction piece of this. And I think the task force, quite frankly, was instrumental in beginning that effort in the Winchester-Frederick area. So that's kind of coming around now to Shenandoah County and Warren County. And again, I can't say enough about the support that the Virginia State Police has given Shenandoah County and the rest of the task force as we try to address these issues and make a local impact for our citizens. So with that, Special Agent Josh Price with the Virginia State Police, again, thanks so much for coming in and being a part of the podcast, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everybody. Again, this is Shenandoah County Sheriff Tim Carter. You can find this podcast and all of my other podcasts on my YouTube channel. That's at Timothy Carter. And while you're there, please go ahead and subscribe and hit that like button. Again, thanks so much. This is Tim Carter at The Source, and have a great day.